Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
From WBRN Radio, running on the Boston Red Network. The Open Source Report, our open source presentation of our family of programs. Nonetheless, with our sponsor, Cranston Software, we run along. We started in the open source business. We at the Cranston Consultancy in 1988, and started doing, of all things, shareware, and later with the Linux kernel. As soon as Mr. Torvalds got it out, we got it. And later with Slackware, that was our evolution. We still have Slackware. We run the program on primarily open source software with Audacity, which you hear here, and various other types of open source software. And in the year 2020, we'll have more of it. And also, because we are cloud, it is running also on Linux from Boston to you, to New York, and onwards, and on the iHeart radio platform, on the Stitcher platform, on the YouTube platform. All these run on open source software, and various other platforms where you get your internet radio or podcast. We won't quibble on what you call it, but it is there. We had one time had the video type of presentation out there. We'll bring that back next year on YouTube, and we'll have more graphs, charts, and that sort of thing, studies. We hope to expand the world of open source, and attempt to come out basically bi-monthly, every 2 weeks or so, maybe a little less than that, because things do change. But this is our December edition here, and I'm not certain that we'll have another edition, but we will have one in January. The kernel, as we always start out, is the stable one, is 5.4.3. And the long term is 4.19.87. On various devices. I'm not sure. I think with Ubuntu we are at either 4.91 or 4.14. These are all long-term. I believe 4.1.9. I don't think we have the 8.1. I'd have to look at that and see, depending on which one we're on. And on Slackware, I don't have it in my little cheat sheet here. But nonetheless, let's get on with it here, and we'll see what we have in terms of where we are here, looking at various sources of open source. The Open Source Initiative, of course, that has been out here, and this is on the 2nd of December. We'd like to introduce and thank someone here, Marstrom, who joined us here at the Open Source Initiative to provide monthly summaries of both license discussions, license reviews on their mailing list. There are many of these around now. different organizations, different versions of the license that you'll have. So let's see, from legacy approval, open source, LDPA public license, another one available here. There are many, many of these licenses, period. Too numerous to mention, almost like forks, but they're not really forks. They are license, period, and this is just some of the stuff that are out here and various people, and this is kind of a review of these. I'm just scanning it very, very quickly here, and various other people that have reporting here on different versions. I won't whip this, but resubmission of European Space Agency public license for approval. This is another public license here in the EU. Incidentally, open source is global. There's no doubt about that. Keeping up on these various things is in itself difficulty, no doubt about that one. Let's get to, this is we got from Tech Republic here, and talking about the 8 worst open source initiatives. Hopefully we can get this up. And just looking at some of these, I remember looking at the worst ones out here that are more negative than others. Distributions of Jack Wallen here, open source initiatives aren't all successful. Shares his picks for the biggest failures of 2010. Now the dateline on this is actually the 11th of December. And over here, open source, just a second here, have been a masterclass, slow burn success from out of nothing. Linux became the champion of the cloud, and containers. We hear a lot talking about containers now is where it is, the Internet of Things. The Steam Machine was going to provide gaming on Linux. Could succeed. They have they already have Steam running on Linux just fine, but Steam wanted more to make more happen. They developed the Steam Machine, a Linux-based gaming console with the purpose of transitioning PC gamers to the console. It failed. Even worse, it failed in a way that no one knows why it failed and what there should have been a sure thing. Faded into memory. I think I remember mentioning that the Steam Machine failed. Cancellations, high cost of entry, no official word ever heard. The only indication of its failure is removal of the Steam Machine's mention from the official site. So I guess when you get removed from the site, that's the end of you. And Ubuntu Unity, that's from the Ubuntu people, was a big fan. One of the, it's tough for me, that's the author here. I was actually a big fan of Unity from Canonical, the in-house desktop environment. I never liked it. The alone made Unity worth using. The HUD. Canonical made a great mistake when it set its sights on Ubuntu Touch and, of course, Mir. And yeah, Touch never went anywhere. New defaults for Ubuntu desktop was def for Unity. Because Mir simply wasn't ready to make matters worse. The delays caused by Mir touchscreen results. Touchscreen never really went over in certain instances. I remember also Ubuntu Phone. Speaking of Ubuntu Touch, the phone was a spectacular failure. I owned one of the first phones released, and from day one I found it almost impossible to use. Ubuntu Touch interface was beyond terrible. Scope's idea had been removed from the project. Canonical had the perfect interface with Unity. If the company transferred Unity to the mobile interface, it could have had a success on its hands. Now remember also one that I was thinking would take off was Firefox's phone. It never did. Unity phone, Ubuntu phone would have been a better sticking it with Ubuntu Edge concept phone. Anyway, the Ubuntu Edge, number one here, is the second Ubuntu phone on the list. It felt a bit like piling on. Truth be told, this phone had serious promise. not only for Ubuntu Edge, the first device to promise true convergence. It was elegant, powerful on paper because it was it could be made it to production. The Edge had been funded by crowd funding. Canonical attempt to raise $32 million. Surprisingly enough, the company would wound up breaking records by raising $12 million. Oh well. Unfortunately, this phone that sounded so incredibly amazing on paper failed to deliver, as some things do. Heartbreaking vaporware stories in the history of Linux. Ubuntu Edge, it could have been the phone to make Linux Mobile a reality. And of course, that was in 2013. 6 years later, we only now seeing the company's bringing to life Linux phones. Well, that's good. Apartheid Linux. Now, this is one I've not heard of, but this is despicable. It's not going to point to any links from its despicable Linux distribution. It said it was literally one of the most negative effects anyone's had on the ability to roll out your own distribution, unlike Hannah Mountain, Linux goal of bringing new and younger users into Linux in open source fold. Apartheid Linux focused its attention on hate, bigotry, and white power. At no time in the history of open source was Linux ever used for such a disgusting purpose. The distribution was so horrible, I even hesitated to add it to the list, as someone might Google it and be accosted with language and images of hate. Spare yourself. The diaspora is a distributed social network consisting of groups independently owned nodes operating together to form a network. Because it was distributed, the network is not owned by any one person, and on paper it was a great idea working in the diaspora, and that was 2010. The first diaspora pod was released the same year. Sadly, the founders of diaspora committed suicide. That's unfortunate there, and it faded away. Rethink DB was to open source a database for pushing real-time updates to applications from the query. Rethink DB used the QL query language and for Ruby, Python, Java, and JavaScript. The most promising feature was DB was a first-class support for real-time change feeds, and according to those behind it, its fate was a mixture of their pervasive human nature and clever machinations of MongoDB's marketing people, as well as the failure to build and experience a go-to-market team, a lack of numeric type of support beyond the 64-bit float. Anyway, it was very quickly surpassed by MongoDB. Samsung DX for Linux. I had not heard of this one. They dropped the ball. So many Linux fans foamed at the mouth to have it in their hands. After all, who would want the ability to plug into an Android phone and have it converted to a full-blown Linux desktop? I know I would, but in 2019, Samsung decided to scrap their DX for Linux. My guess is it wasn't yet another instance of great mythical beast convergency failing, floundering or failing. Such a promise leads to such disappointment. So long, DX. Honorable mention is Hannah Mountain. I've not heard of this one either. It doesn't fit the timeline. Hannah Mountain deserves a mention. Before I point the finger of mockery at this distribution, I want to at least give the developers props for his intention. The goal of it was to appeal to younger users. That's great, and at the time, Hannah Mountain was a solid launching point. What was Hannah Mountain Linux? A purple-pink themed Linux distribution with Katie as a desktop and the Disney Channel character font and center. Attracting younger users to Linux is an honorable goal. It had been better served by at least adding some applications that would appeal to users instead of doing more than just theming Katie. I've never been a Katie person, but again, there are different people out here. Let me just roll along here a little bit. And this is also from Tech Republic. And we'll see. Okay, here we go. This was in August of 2019. There's a surprising short list of issues Linux developers need to address to reach the masses. I always want to reach the masses. Recent friend asked me for help installing Linux on aging desktop. The was originally running Windows 7 upgrade to Windows 10 due to the end of life for 7, and after the upgrade, the laptop became nearly impossible to use. Why? Because Windows 10 failed to recognize hardware. It didn't meet its specification. The laptop in question was an old Lenovo, so it wasn't worth salvaging. Anyway, he installed 19.4 on it, Ubuntu. I wish I could have said that everything went well. Unfortunate to say it did would be a lie. The quick installation was quick and simple. Okay, well, usually happens. Everyone who's installed Linux on a laptop knows that wireless support is a hit and miss. That is a big situation. We've had that before too, particularly with Slackware, although it's expeditionally better than it was years ago. This particular case in point, I use it for proprietary hardware, and that's the big problem right there. Also understanding that there are ways to install firmware to make such chipsets function. Unfortunately, this was a situation where the friend didn't exactly have all the time in the world there, and that's always a problem there. Times have changed. Once upon a time, the vast majority of people work daily at the desktop. Most users rarely check their desktops, as consumers' majority of them spend their time glued with the desktops. No longer the case, or where a majority of people on compute on. I spend probably 90% of my compute time at a desk. The masses, on the other hand, work on laptops, tablets, and mostly phones. Wireless is still not 100%. High-resolution screens require users to configure settings so they are readable. And before I continue, outside of these three issues, Linux performing flawless on laptops. It runs with speed, reliability, and so forth and so on. However, it's too thick peanut butter. There are 3 points there. Any distribution, and one of the big problems with Linux on the older laptops is that some of the distribution, including Ubuntu, it's harder to find the 32-bit versions. They all move, not the 32-bit versions of the distribution, but of applications that only run on 64-bit. Of Android, there's no reason to get your hopes up for a Linux phone will conquer the great divide. This is Android and iOS. Well, iOS, of course, that is Apple there. Laptops are a different beast altogether, and those who doubt Linux could achieve such a feat only look to Chrome OS to see that Linux can, in fact, succeed in reaching the masses. Chrome OS has managed to best three issues. I've yet to see Chrome OS not be able to use wireless, work with high-resolution screens, so forth and so on. Chrome OS might do two of those things better than any operating system, with the Mac OS besting them with a high-res display. But Linux can't overcome that. There's no reason why not. A lot of that is fashioning of the distribution, or the apps to the distribution. That's the big problem there. The 36 and 64-bit. Now that will disappear as more of the old 32-bit machines disappear out of it here, and in some cases they succeed having high-resolution displays. High-resolution displays are something new with some of the newer notebooks that have what appears to be less powerful chipsets, but they supposedly are. But they do have the resolution on these chips, whether it be NVIDIA or whomever. And we won't get into suspension and hibernation. I understand the problems of combination of proprietary hardware and the mixing and matching of components. Now, my experience with Windows 10 on older hardware, it found the older hardware. and it's one of the things out there. I should have prefixed this with the usual. If you read my writings over the years, you know I support Linux, yada, 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 yada. Linux has been my primary operating system since 1997. I only use Mac OS when I need to edit video or work with an editor on a book, because LibreOffice cannot handle a 70,000 word manuscript. I never tried that before, and track changes with that perspective. There's no better operating system than Linux that can cut and dry. In fact, that said, Linux distributions need to dive headfirst into the waters of mobility. All the universe will pray to the desktop for my cold dear hands. Anyway, yeah, there's no doubt about that. The idea of getting it onto tablets is out there. And the whole idea of Chrome. Now, Chrome comes out of Google's operation, and where does Chrome stand? Well, that in itself is something to look at. This is from CNBC. Open source software takes over the world, and this is by Katie. Interesting here. Much of the software that powers the world's largest companies, protect our data, encrypts our national security, is open to the public. Anyone can download the source code behind Facebook's user interface, Google's Android operating system, or even Goldman Sachs data modeling program, and use it as a building block for a new project. Now, this is interesting. A lot of this software is actually developed collaboratively, and that is and created and maintained by an army of thousands, many unpaid volunteers there. The world of open source software, where code is written and distributed freely, and that is the combination there. Mr. Stallman would like that. He even went to Microsoft. And that was a short article here, but again, that is some of the principal things that you can find the same software. If it, say, for instance, runs Bloomberg's information system there, you can get that. And of course, if you want the commercial, you can go to somebody like Cloudera or whomever. And the interface is the Dent project. Is creating an operating system for switches. The initial focus is retail. The move could help Amazon achieve lower costs on hardware use in retail stores such as Amazon Go. I'd never heard of the Dent project before, but it's out there. Amazon's contributing a large piece of open source software that gives it a leg up in its physical stores. The Linux Foundation, and you hear about them, announced a new network operating system called Dent. And let's see here. Had not heard of Dent, but we try to. Is a proposed operating system for switches, which are pieces of hardware made to route data around networks, usually within companies or within companies and the internet. The traditional market has been dominated by big companies, Broadcom. You carry their chips everywhere. A lot of underlying silicon chips. Cisco, which sells finished assembled products. By creating an open source alternative, the meaning that anyone can access and contribute to the code underlying the software. Amazon is partners in a deal, or could loosen their company's controls and achieve lower prices. And that's the reason there's no sign Amazon intends to sell company switches or other hardware, nor will it design its own chips for that purpose. Rather, the company is contributing to an operating system that runs on the chips embedded in the gear. Amazon is experienced running network hardware in a scale and data center for market-leading Amazon Web Service cloud business, very big there. Dent is designed for switches that work at lower speeds than the one found in public cloud data centers. The Dent statement doesn't say anything about Amazon Web Services. With Amazon on board, Dent could impact a data center's network market, specifically at levels of underlying silicon. Dent could help with smaller chip makers that compete with Broadcom, and as well as smaller companies in the switch business. Switch chip companies, Marvel, you've heard of them before. NVIDIA announced an intention to buy a part of Friday's announcement, along with Amazon, and some are switch making companies like Delta and Winstrom. Microsoft has thought about how to do more with networking switches inside a data center. It came with a Linux-based operating system called Sonic, released it on the open source license. That was in 2016. Broadcom and Cisco said it had developed a networking chip that other companies could place in their own hardware products thanks to a $320 billion acquisition of an Israeli-based company. And Intel has bought another Israeli-based company. We understand the competition, Broadcom's CEO said. So, that's one of the things. Let me quickly go to the Dent project. I think we can get it, and its announcement here with Dent. We didn't. Anyway. And we have one other story here as we find this up. This is about coding, how people code. This is one of those that we picked up here. This is from, I believe, the Medium package. This is from the Atlantic. The coders programming themselves out of a job when workers automate their duties. Who should reap the benefits? Is Brian Merchant here in the Atlantic magazine. Anyway, in 2016, an anonymous confession appeared on Read It from around 6 years ago until now. I've done nothing at work as far as office confessions go. That might be, but this coder, Postfish 1066, said he worked for a well-known tech company and really meant nothing. He wrote within the last 8 months, arriving on a quality assurance job, that he had fully automated his entire workload. I'm not joking. For 40 hours each week, I go to work, play League of Legends in my office, browse Reddit, and do whatever I feel. In the past 6 years, I maybe have done 50 hours of real work when his bosses realized that he'd worked less than half a decade than most Silicon Valley programmers did in a week. They fired him. Anyway, ultimately prompting its protagonist to delete not just the post but his entire account. A year later, someone calling himself or herself posed a query to Workplace on Stack Exchange, one of the web's most important forums for programmers. It is unethical for me not to tell my employer I have automated my job. Is it? The conflicted coder described accepting a programming gig that turned out to be a glorified data entry 6 months ago, writing scripts and putting the entire job on autopilot. Who used to take the last guy last month now takes maybe 10 minutes. The job was full-time with benefits, allowed Everable to work from home. The program produced near-perfect results, and all management knew is its employees simply did flawless work. Anyway, as of October 2018, it was viewed nearly 500,000 times. The reactions were split between those who felt that Everable was cheating or at least deceiving the employer. Evil never responded. Everable, perhaps spooked by the attention. Self-automation or automatic automation at the moment when the specter of massive automation haunts workers, rogue programmers demonstrate how the threat could be a godsend. When taken into coders' hand without their employer's knowledge, since Fisher lay 1060 and Everable posted anonymously, promptly disappeared. The promise of automation, taunted by optimistic economists and futurists, has been yielding work to machines and would eliminate the drudgery of mindless, repetitive work, freeing humans to fulfill our days with leisure. LBJ talked about that. Creative pursuits or more dynamic work in 1930. John Millard Keynes, that automated machines and methods of mass production would help deliver a 15-hour work week, and even those hours would be only necessary to help men feel They had something to do, fulfillment there. Lyndon Johnson, in a speech at Syracuse University, talked about leisure. Last time it's been talked about by an American president. Nearly a half-century later, despite formidable advances in technology, repetitive tasks persist. Automation continues apace. Millions of jobs once carried by humans are accomplished by software and mechanized factories, while Americans are working harder and increasingly longer hours. The gains from automation have generally been enjoyed not by those who operate the machines, but by those who own the machines. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the share of income going to wages in those nations has been decreasing since 1970. Things like cash reserves and machinery have been increasing. It has seemed that some of the only workers who realized any scraps from the rustic old promise of automation are the ones who carve out the code to claim it for themselves. Programmers, of course, have been writing code that automate their work for decades. Programmers generally involved in utilizing tools that add automation at different levels for code formatting to merging to different code bases. Direct messaging on Reddit and emails about a dozen programmers who said that their self-automating has tackled inventory management, report writing, graphics, rendering, databases. Most asked to remain anonymous, no doubt about that. When I started my job, literally took me 8 hours a day, and an early self-automator, who I call Gary, told me he worked for a large corporate hotel chain that began to computerize its workflow in the 90s. He quickly recognized that he was spending a lot of time on repetitive tasks, so he started learning to code after hours. Over the course of 3 months, I built a piece of code way back to Lotus 123 when they used to resell Lotus, before IBM scrapped it. Then a popular PC spreadsheet program not only automated individual repetitive tasks, it effectively automated the entire job, he said. He didn't tell the bosses, the wise of being there, if it will to have free time in a day. He told me I spent the time learning about other systems in the hotel, and then made myself useful and helping management with bottlenecks in the system. Automation has an easy erase mental toil, and reduce stress and let him pursue his actual interests. In effect, I made my position into something I love, which is troubleshooting. And somebody reporting Todd Heidelhuffer here, for a Pennsylvania insurance company in 2000, when he realized his work could be done by a computer program. I was given the green light at the time with only a year of IT experience. He told me in a direct message when I started writing code, I could replace his job. He passed his day playing chess online, and I really only completely idled, was only completely idle for 6 to 9 months. In the field, workers rarely have any formal input into whether their job is automated. Some embrace the extra leisure time, while others use the spare time to learn new skills, tackle new programmatic challenges. What I quit like those stories is that it shows automation still has potential to reduce the amount of boring work. That is from Jamie Woodcock, a sociologist at the Oxford Internet Institute, told me, which was the promise of automation, that we won't have to work 60 hours a week. Yet many self-automators are afraid of sharing their code outside of their cubicle. No doubt they're very wise to do that. He fears it may claim the IP address as its own. One coder described keeping the fact that he had fully automated his job in the company because he feared it would claim the IP as its own and refuse to compensate him. Jordan said he and his colleagues keep a tight lid on automated techniques to maintain control on how it's used. Another programmer went to great lengths to conceal the contours of his fully automated $50,000 a year job from his bosses. Management could check on his computer screen via the network, so he ran a loop of pre-recorded videos. Very smart right there. This is perhaps any automated work can feel like cheating and be treated as such by corporate policy. On Amazon's Mechanical Trunk, the tech company's marketplace for macro automation is explicitly against the term service. Some coders say they have been fired outright for automating their work. In 2011, a user acceptable losses wrote, I took what I had developed and replaced me with an idiot. I have taken a business asset that was making $30,000 a year profit and turned it into $1 million a year business for the company. They fired me for it to save $30,000 a year of my salary. Job creators, my ass. Few workers may have a desire to fully self-automating, but it appears there, and I automated my job with Node.js. A few podcasts out there and that, and people to check into this automation whole situation there. Employees were increasingly needed to automate their own jobs and get out, writes a Harvard Business Review. Worldwide, we see many more top-down managerial mandates for bottom-up automation initiatives. So let me finish this up very quick. Go too long with reading this, but anyway, Brian Merchant is a writer and editor in Los Angeles. He's author of One Device to the Secret History of the iPhone, and a forthcoming book in the Machine, a book about a lot of these uprisings. I remember them. Anyway, self-automation shows that coders are in a unique position to negotiate with their employers over which automated derived gains like shorter work weeks, flexibility there. Not ready for that prime time yet. In unionized settings, they could do that, give rise to industries which actually enjoy a 15-hour work week with AI. Anyway, that is from AI, and we can look forward to that more and more every day, particularly with open source. This will end our open source report on the 19th from WBRN Radio, and we did have some more stuff here. Tesla, let me just throw this in very quickly. I'd almost left this behind. Tesla has software, incidentally, at GitHub. You can look them up at GitHub, and that's, Tesla. GitHub's home to 40 million developers use GitHub. GitHub, of course, is now owned by Microsoft. And many in the open source Libra Movement have alternatives to that. Tesla version 10 software, this is 2000 September, updates include smart summons, which lets some car owners summons their car as long as it's within line of sight. And it adds connectivity for Netflix, YouTube, and Hulu. Anyway, I'm not sure how you drive down the street with those. Anyway, some of the things going on there. Shares in Electro Track is a blog for vehicle enthusiasts. Tesla might be able to make deliveries in only 1,000. How many cars they put out here? And their version 2 smart summons to summons your car will be allowed in this with the Model S, the Model X, and the Model 3. I'm not sure how you're going to be watching YouTube here. Anyway, top non-driving activities that people do in their car, and more than half the drivers do when they are behind the wheel. So I suppose so. They'll have something to do. Literally at Tesla, they can look at it, and Electrotrack's site here. Tesla also released a new solar-powered system here. Solar-powered system. This released a giant new version of its latest home solar-powered system, a 15.4 kilohertz solar system, suitable home. You can see where that's going. Very large house there, and this was on the 14th of December. So Tesla is in many situations here, and I don't know where that goes in terms of that. So, and here's a different organization here. The Software Freedom Conservancy is a not-for-profit charity that helps promote, improve, develop, and defend free, library, and open source software. The Conservative provides a non-profit home and infrastructure for various open source projects. to focus on what they do best, right, and improve FLOSS for the general public. Something new every day. This is November the 9th, and this will truly end us, our situation. This is Cranston Salway in the Jerry Pitt broadcast booth.